This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. At that moment, a strange force suddenly emerged directly in Yunxiao's spiritual altar. It was weak and delicate, and it slowly surged into his soul, making it difficult to detect. But, Yunxiao's soul power was much more powerful than ordinary 8th-tier alchemy techniques, so he sensed it in an instant. A clone immediately separated from his soul and grabbed the force in his palm, frowning as he observed it. There was an extremely tiny symbol in the power that was spinning non-stop. Imprint seed? Yunxiao said in surprise. Suddenly, he was taken aback, and he immediately understood Yuan Zimao's intention in using the heaven wave illumination. He wanted to plant the seed of the mark in everyone's body. His expression suddenly changed. This imprint seed was undetectable. Other than him, there might not be a second person who could discover it. Moreover, the Wind and Moon building was a place where all the heroes of the world gathered. They would definitely become the overlords of a region in the future. If he planted this mark seed in all of them, the consequences would be chilling. This kid is really gutsy. I don't know if it's his own idea or Red Moon City's, Yunxiao said with an uncertain look. If it's the latter, then it's very meaningful. At this moment, the scene in front of them returned to the Wind and Moon building. Everyone seemed to wake up in an instant, and they looked at each other in a daze. At this time, rays of light suddenly bloomed from different people. It was the light of advancement. More than half of the people started to advance on the spot. There were even people who crossed several stars in a row, shocking the entire place. Even Cheng Haomiao, who was sitting on the throne, had a look of surprise on his face. A ray of light rushed out of his body and he had stepped into the 2-star martial emperor realm. Yuan Zimao's expression changed drastically, and a trace of regret flashed in his eyes. How do you feel, everyone? Yuan Zimao suppressed the complicated emotions in his heart and looked at the confused people with a smile. Suddenly, someone exclaimed, "Arg! This is the Wind and Moon building, I remember now." Baiming Lifeng was filled with doubts. "Brother Zimao, what's going on? I've only been in the illusionary realm for about a month. How could someone break through 4 stars in a row? Isn't this too exaggerated? One must note that all the people here were martial honorables. To break through to 4-star in a month, this would make all the geniuses in the world unable to live." More than a month? The young revered martial artist who had broken through to 4 stars was shocked and said, "I remember that I stayed in that illusionary realm for 5 years. I fought against my own illusion for 5 years before I won. More than a month? 5 years? I clearly remember it was half a year. Mine is 1 year and 7 months old." Everyone was shocked to find out that everyone's time was different, but the only similarity was that they had defeated their own illusion. Yuan Zimao chuckled and said, "This is the miraculous effect of the heaven wave reflection. In fact, you've only entered the illusion for 10 breaths. If you don't believe me, you can look at the tea beside you. That's why this phenomenon is also known as the 10-breath reflection." Everyone looked at the blood tea beside them and saw the fragrance and hot smoke rolling out. After carefully remembering it, it was indeed the same as before they entered the illusion. How can it be so magical? Baiming Lifeng asked in shock. If it can only last for 10 breaths and it can last for several years, then if I use this heaven wave mirror to cultivate, wouldn't I be able to reach the peak of the martial supreme realm in a day? As soon as he said this, everyone gasped in shock. Yuan Zimao laughed out loud. It's impossible for such a situation to exist. Otherwise, the current Red Moon City would not be composed of the 7 superpowers. The city would have been filled with peak martial supremes. He explained, the heaven wave mirror's advantage is to observe the 5 essences, condense karma, and turn enemies into your enemies. You can't come out until you defeat the illusion. But no matter how long you've experienced it, it's only 10 breaths in the realm of heavenly martial arts. Even so, it's still a godlike thing, Baiming Lifeng continued. With this item, even a pig can advance to a martial supreme if it can observe it several times a day. Everyone's expression turned grave. Having such a large-scale illusion cultivation technique was definitely the dream of all the sections. Not only in the Wind and Moon building, but many old monsters who were staring at the Sky Garden were also extremely shocked. However, they also knew that there must be a limit to this item. Otherwise, it would be too heaven-defying, and it was impossible for the Red Moon City to display it. As expected, Yuan Zimao smiled and said, "Once the Wuan image is destroyed, it's useless to observe it." In other words, a martial artist could only use it once in his life. The more time passed, the worse one's comprehension of martial arts would be. Brother Lifeng only took a month to come out. I really admire you. Back then, I had to stay for 3 whole months before I came out. I see. Everyone sighed in their hearts, and the tense atmosphere finally dissipated. Chang Haomiao said, "Yes, I also stayed for 3 months. Compared to Brother Feng's talent, I really don't want to live." He glanced at Baiming Lifeng, and the joy he had felt from just breaking through immediately disappeared as he calmed down. Yunxiao nodded to himself. He had stayed for half a year to cultivate the golden body Dharma form, or he would have shattered the illusion with a Vajra fist. Baiming Lifeng chuckled and said, "Brother Vast Expanse really knows how to make fun of me. You've broken through to the level of a 2-stars martial sovereign in just 3 months. Now, the younger generation in the world must respect you. I hope that you'll take care of this little brother in all aspects in the future." Chang Haomiao revealed a strange smile and said, "The difference in cultivation level doesn't matter. It only means that I've absorbed more Yuan Qi than you. After becoming a 9 heavens martial sovereign, it was more important to have a deeper understanding of the rules of heaven and earth. The deeper one's understanding, the stronger one's strength would be and the further one could walk on this path. Brother Lifeng, you've defeated your illusion in just a month. I'm afraid your talent is number 1 in the world. You have to take care of this little brother in the future." The conversation between the two of them was heard by everyone, and they all remembered it. The youth who had just broken through 4 levels, his joy was immediately gone, as if he had been doused with cold water. Hearing Chang Haomiao's words, his talent should be extremely low, and it would be difficult for him to go far in the future. Instead, he became depressed. Baiming Lifeng shook his head with a wry smile. "I have to thank Brother Zimao for his blessing this time, allowing all our friends to obtain great benefits. I can't thank you enough." Everyone also expressed their thanks. These were all from the bottom of their hearts, and they had a good impression of Yuan Zimao and the Red Moon City. Yuan Zimao was grinning from ear to ear. This was the result he had expected. The only thing he was unhappy about was that Chang Haomiao had advanced to a 2-star martial sovereign. However, if you don't give up the child, you won't be able to catch the wolf. These were insignificant compared to the imprint seeds planted in everyone's soul. And looking at the situation, it seemed that no one noticed it, all of them were grateful. However, there were also exceptions, and that was the 2 monkeys from the southern mountain range. Yuan Zimao looked unhappily at the 2 monkeys. One of them had an indifferent expression as he gently sipped his tea. The other had a dazed expression as if he had not yet woken up. "Why do my 2 friends from the southern mountain range seem to be unhappy with my arrangements?" he snorted. Everyone's eyes immediately fell on the 2 of them. Yunxiao sneered in his heart and said indifferently, "There's no joy or anger. There's no such thing as a free lunch in the world." Yuan Zimao's body trembled, and a huge wave was set off in his heart. He did not know what Yunxiao meant by his words, and with his strength, it was impossible for him to notice anything unusual. But, the speaker did not mean it, but the listener paid attention to it. What's more, the speaker had meant it. This made Yuan Zimao unable to calm down. Insatiable greed. Drinking someone else's good tea and getting their help, you won't be able to spit out ivory. Chang Haomiao said coldly. That's right, he really has no class, and no integrity. I didn't expect the people of the southern mountain range to be like this. Chang Haomiao's words were immediately echoed by the crowd. All of them were slightly angry, disdainful and cold. Seeing that Yunxiao did not say much, Yuan Zimao's nervous heart finally calmed down a little. Nothing can satisfy everyone, so there's no need to blame anyone. Yunxiao smiled and said nothing. Fellow townsman, you look very serious, but you look very strong. You've vaguely reached the peak of a one-star martial emperor and you look like you're about to make a breakthrough at any time. How long have you spent? Following his words, everyone's gaze fell on Li Yi. Li Yi's eyes were filled with doubt ever since he came out, and there was even a hint of casualness in them. At this moment, when Yunxiao asked him this question, his eyes began to show confusion. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in his pupils as he glared at Yunxiao and shouted, Li Yunxiao. You're Li Yunxiao. Yunxiao wiped his sweat and said in embarrassment, could it be that my fellow townsman has been in there for 10 or 20 years? Li Yi glared at Yunxiao with eyes full of hatred and snorted angrily. It seemed that only then did his divine sense gradually come back from the environment and began to accept the reality before his eyes. Poochie. Someone couldn't help but laugh. You don't even recognize him. You couldn't have stayed here for 100 years, right? There were many people who laughed lightly, but none of them dared to laugh so arrogantly. After all, the martial supreme's strength was clear for all to see. Moreover, he was not a kind person. Ruan Zimao and the others were also secretly surprised. If Yunxiao had not pointed it out, they would not have noticed that Li Yi's complexion had indeed changed a lot, and the faint aura coming from them was indeed that of a peak one-star martial emperor. Ruan Zimao and Baiming Lifeng were shocked. Before entering the heaven wave reflection, Li Yi's aura was at most similar to Zhu Shuaqi and Lu Yuxing, but now, it was even stronger than theirs. It was 100 times more difficult for a martial supreme to break through than a martial honor. Chang Haomiao had been stuck at the peak of a one-star martial supreme for a long time. With the help of the 2 cups of blood tea and the heaven wave reflection, he had finally broken through. Could it be that he had really stayed in there for decades? Li Yi's expression slowly recovered from the solemnness and confusion. He had finally stepped into reality and returned to his arrogant self. His cold gaze swept across everyone, sending chills down their spines. Yunxiao was a little surprised. He looked at Li Yi's appearance and found that he had concealed his aura, but his spirit was placed in his bones and acupuncture points. He vaguely had the characteristics of an expert, which was completely different from before he had entered the array. There was a hint of martial arts in his every move. He suddenly had a feeling that the person who gained the most from the 10 breaths reflection was Li Yi. Although he could not put his finger on it, this feeling was indeed very strong. Li Yi retracted his sharp gaze and retracted it. His eyes became a little cloudy as he snorted and laughed. This heaven wave mirror is not bad. How much is it? I'll buy it. Everyone was floored. Not only could this kind of magic treasure be used in battle, but it was also of great significance to a sect. It was almost at the level of a sect's treasure, and this native actually dared to say that he wanted to buy it. Ruan Zimao also snorted. The significance of the heaven wave mirror to a sect aside, just the fact that it had planted a brand seed in everyone's body was irreplaceable. Li Yi wrapped his fingers on the table as his eyes wandered. It's an excellent item, but it's a pity that it's buried in the hands of mediocre people. Ruan Zimao's face darkened and he said coldly, is there something wrong with your brain again? Li Yi snorted and said, I heard you guys talking about martial arts just now. It was so funny. What do you mean by the more time passes, the lower your talent becomes? You're a laughingstock. Oh. Chang Haomiao replied coldly. Does this mean that you have more brilliant ideas? I'm interested to hear what you monkeys of the southern mountain range have to say about martial arts. But I'm not interested in talking to trash like you. Martial arts are meant for fighting, not for discussing. Li Yi said sarcastically. As soon as he said this, his aura fluctuated with his words, and a faint pressure was exuded, making people feel extremely depressed. Yunxiao frowned slightly. He was a little familiar with this pressure, as if he had felt it from you before. It was indeed demonic aura, but it was purer and stronger than ordinary demonic aura. Li Yi's constant arrogance caused the atmosphere in the Sky Garden to become increasingly tense. Ruan Zimao's face darkened. As the host of this banquet and the initiator of this banquet, he could only secretly call himself unlucky to have encountered such a thorn in his side. If he did not handle it well, it would show that he was incompetent. At this time, he had no choice but to step forward. Yuan Zimao put away the heaven wave mirror and sneered. I've given you a taste of sweetness. Do you think that you can look down on all the heroes in the world just because your strength has improved a little? His aura rose and he immediately pressed forward. A spirit pressure appeared in front of Li Yi and blocked the power. The two of them were locked in a stalemate. Everyone was secretly happy and waiting to watch a good show. The leader of the 7 stars of the eastern region finally couldn't bear it anymore and was going to attack the country bumpkin. However, this monkey was also very strong, and it was very likely to turn into a fierce battle. They couldn't wait for the two of them to fight until both of them were injured, and maybe they could get some benefits. Li Yi laughed out loud and said arrogantly, I'm not looking down on the group of heroes. I'm just a genius blessed by the heavens. I'm going to laugh my head off. Yuan Zimao sneered coldly and suddenly attacked. A cold light flashed in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone felt the sudden glare and closed their eyes with a scream. Li Yi laughed out loud, and the sword on his body suddenly spun, emitting a clanging sound. A sword ray rose into the air, clashing with Yuan Zimao's sword aura. Boom! Under the attack of the two extremely powerful sword gleams, the sword aura was shattered into countless rays of light that scattered in all directions. A faint glow appeared beside Yuan Zimao, blocking the sword aura. Meanwhile, the temperature in front of Li Yi dropped drastically, and a layer of ice appeared. The shattered sword aura was completely frozen, and it was still frozen in the air. Baiming Lifeng's heart trembled, and he clenched his fists as a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He was now 100% sure that Li Yi had learned the Baiming family's key to frost. The martial supremes in the Sky Garden started to panic. In a battle between martial sovereigns, they would not be able to withstand the residual sword chi. At this moment, a spiritual pressure suddenly appeared in the garden and suppressed all the sword chi. Then, they teleported to the outside space. This was the defense system that came with it. Li Yi snorted coldly and stood proudly with his sword in a flower dance, his face frivolous. Yuan Zimao's brows were tightly locked together. His attack this time was also to verify Li Yi's cultivation level. After one move, it looked like a draw, but in reality, he was at a disadvantage, and the killing intent in his eyes increased. Do you think you can defeat a 1-star martial emperor just because you're a peak 1-star martial emperor? The sword in Yuan Zimao's hand slashed into the air, his hands continuously forming hand seals. That 9th-level profound armament became one with his body, and a faint shadow appeared on the sword. It was actually the spirit of the weapon, and it continuously resonated with Yuan Zimao's aura. One sword to level the river. Yuan Zimao let out a soft cry, and his sword's momentum was like a rainbow. With a hiss, it directly split the sky, and a crack followed the sword's momentum and slashed down on Li Yi. The battle between the two of them attracted everyone's attention. It also triggered the nerves of the old monsters who were secretly observing in Red Moon City. The tyrannical Sky Tiger sighed. This brat is so arrogant just because he has a little bit of ability. It's hard for him to achieve anything great. I think he'll die sooner or later. Did I? Xiaoba laughed, I think he's quite capable. He's so brave and daring. He's so arrogant in front of the world's young elites. He's completely different from our Death God Palace's style of always acting in secret. I have high hopes for him. Humph, the tallest tree in the forest is bound to be destroyed by the wind. If you don't know how to restrain yourself, you'll be met with misfortune. The tyrannical Sky Tiger said disdainfully, I think the Death God Palace is going to be defeated by you ignorant kids. What do you think, little girl? He looked at Li, who had been silent all this time. Suddenly, her body trembled, and her calm eyes shrank. She seemed to be able to see beyond the layers of space. The situation in the garden in the sky made her heart tremble. Li Yi's cold expression gradually turned into a ferocious smile as he faced the unstoppable sword. He said coldly, I don't know if a peak 1-star martial emperor can defeat a 1-star martial emperor, but you are still nothing in front of me. His body suddenly trembled, and a tyrannical aura spread out. His body seemed to have increased in size, and his surging demonic power blocked the sword. Yunxiao's pupils constricted, and there was a look of horror in his eyes. A blood-red meridian appeared on Li Yi's arm. It was the ancestral bloodline of the demon race. Boom. As the demonic energy surged out, the space seemed to tremble slightly. The ancestral bloodline appeared on Li Yi's body, and his peak 1-star martial emperor cultivation instantly broke through. The power of a 2-star martial emperor spread out as he took a step forward. He actually broke through in the middle of a battle? Everyone was greatly shocked. The expressions of the people on the throne changed, revealing a look of shock. The martial arts duel, which he had originally predicted to be a fierce battle, was instantly tipped in Li Yi's favor. One chi shakes the 9 heavens. Li Yi threw a punch and Ruan Zimao's sword aura was instantly disintegrated. The fist's momentum was earth-shattering and shattered the space with a loud bang, completely suppressing Ruan Zimao. Bastard! Don't be so arrogant. Ruan Zimao was furious. He was filled with regret. If he had known that the Heaven Wave Mirror would increase the monkey's strength so much, he wouldn't have helped him grow even if he didn't plant the seed of the brand in everyone's body. Today, the eyes of the world were focused on him. If he lost this battle, his reputation would be in vain. He frantically poured all his emperor chi into the sword, ready to strike with all his might to regain his dignity. In the Red Moon City, Ruan Hongyu was also shocked. She said in disbelief, "How is that possible?" That youth from the southern mountain range had destroyed Zi Mao's flat plain sword with a single punch. Even if it's 1 star higher, it's still impossible. Jiang Churen's face was also solemn, but she was much calmer. She said in a deep voice, "This kid has the bloodline of the demon race. If I'm not wrong, it was the power of the ancestral bloodline of the demon race that helped him break through to the 2-star level. If it's really a demon who has activated the ancestral bloodline, then Zima will lose today without a doubt." Ruan Hongyu was stunned for a moment before she said anxiously, "This. What's good about this? Husband, quickly think of a way. Zimao is the leader of the 7 stars of the eastern region. He can't lose. If he loses, his reputation and self-confidence will suffer an unparalleled blow." Jiang Churen glanced at her beloved wife and sighed, "I told you not to be too optimistic. If we lose today, it might not be a bad thing for Zimao. On the contrary, it will help him grow. Can't the leader of the 7 stars of the eastern region lose? Then didn't I, the city master of Red Moon City, the leader of the eastern region, still lose back then? If you can't afford to lose, how can you grow?" Ruan Hongyu stared at the water screen in a daze, her face dejected. "Oh. Do you want to use the Great Reverent technique?" Li Yi came from the sky and laughed, "Wherever I step, I'll make them submit." One chi shakes the 9 heavens. He shouted and circulated the power of the Zhu bloodline again. The blood on his hand was bright red, and the true chi of the key to ice formula was on his skin. The surrounding temperature dropped suddenly, and the entire sky garden seemed to have entered the winter solstice. One sword to split the heavens. Ruan Zima was filled with grief and indignation. His sword chi soared into the sky, wanting to kill everything. However, reality was always cruel. The sword light was instantly suppressed by the fist force and collapsed bit by bit. The long sword was sent flying with a bang, turning into a rainbow light and falling to the ground. Li Yi's fist intent did not slow down as it directly landed on his chest. Bang! A muffled explosion rang out as the ice true chi directly entered Ruan Zimao's body, instantly freezing his meridians, limbs, and bones. His entire person was as still as a rock. The crowd was shocked. Although everyone had expected this result when Li Yi broke through to 2 stars martial emperor, it was not such a strong visual impact. With just 2 moves, he had completely suppressed the leader of the 7 stars of the eastern region and the #1 person among the younger generation in the entire eastern region. Baiming Lifeng suddenly stood up and said in a cold voice, "Where did you learn the essentials of profound ice?" Li Yi sneered, "Are you saying that only the Baiming family can use the essentials of mystic ice and I can't? Why? If you're not convinced, then go." Otherwise, shut up. Biming Lifeng's face was ashen. Ruan Zimao's battle just now had given him a great shock. Although he was confident that he wouldn't lose so badly if he went up, his chances of winning were still very small. He snorted with a gloomy face and floated to Ruan Zimao's side. He began to circulate his cultivation technique to relieve the cold. If the Biming dark ice chi stayed in the body for a long time, not only would it cause frostbite, but it would also directly affect one's martial talent. Li Yi laughed arrogantly and swept his eyes over the crowd, but no one dared to look him in the eye. Finally, his eyes fell on Yun Shao, and he said in a cold voice, "Li Yun Shao, do you dare to fight me for your old hatred?"